God has specifically chosen you to be here at this time and in this place. You have incredible potential, purpose, and calling to push back the darkness and be a light for Christ. Stand for nothing and you'll fall for anything. It's time to stand your ground. This is Unapologetic. Hi everyone, welcome to Unapologetic. Today's episode is very near and dear to my heart. I'm having my friend Valerie Rodriguez come on the show and share about her just miraculous story into motherhood. She became pregnant with twins unexpectedly and lost one of them during delivery, and then the other child has survived 296 days in the NICU and has had even more miracles happen since then. And so I'm having her on because I want y'all to hear just this miraculous, hope-filled story and friend of mine. I know that you will enjoy today's episode. Okay, so I'm going to share my first memory, the real memory I have of you, which I haven't told you yet.
I don't think you have.
I haven't told you yet. But I want to share it because we have a lot of college girls that listen, and one's in their early 20s. So as you know, I had a dramatic rededication in college and I wasn't walking with God, and then just had a really big moment of clarity where I was like, I don't want to live this way anymore. I need to start following God and doing what's right. And so basically overnight, God changed how I was living. And I mean, the truth was I was pretty bored because I went from, having a lot to do and a lot of friends and stuff to do on the weekends to, okay, well, now that I'm going to do what I know to be right, I mean, I was kind of alone. Luckily, God brought Ryan 3 months later, so that was okay. But I remember God telling me, well, start a Bible study. And Valerie and I were both in Chi Omega together. And so I was like, oh, okay, I'll start a Bible study for the other girls in Chi Omega. And I bet God is just going to bless that. So many people are going to come. I'd made it up in my mind. And so for the whole summer, only 2 people came. And one of them was Valerie. And I remember, because I was like, oh no, am I supposed to be doing this because a lot of people aren't coming? And God just kept telling me, no, Valerie is here. And one of our friends, Ashley, kept coming. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to keep with it. And then lo and behold, little Valerie ended up being president the next year. And so it was just cool because God really helped show me that that was what I was supposed to do. And that even if there's just one person sitting there and you're studying the Bible together, that next person could be the president. So I've always thought of that with you.
That's
and I've
funny.
shared it for years with teenagers and college students who they want to make a difference, but maybe a lot of people aren't showing up, or it's only a few people. And it's but that next person could end up being super influential, which of course you were.
That time in my life was really hard.
Yeah.
So in that summer moment before my senior year. So I think, that Bible study actually did help. Thank you.
For sure. No, it was just it's the first thing that comes to mind whenever I think about you. And then of course, more recently, we have a very shared experience, but then just kind of what ended up happening, of course, was different in my family and your family. And so I want you to share just your story of pregnancy and the twins and the NICU, and just, can you tell us about what's gone on in your life lately?
Yes. So Robert and I were not planning on having any more children. We have 2 beautiful children, and we were set. But, clearly God had other plans, and I actually had an IUD. And one day I just was bleeding, and I thought, I'm having a miscarriage. And I thought it was an ectopic pregnancy.
Yeah.
And so I called Robert and I said, I need to go to the doctor now. So I went and they said, you're pregnant And the IUD was perfectly placed right there, too.
Wow.
You could see it on the sonogram. It was actually pretty incredible. And the doctor said, basically, like, what do you want to do at this point? And, you know, I said, well, I want to keep the baby, so let's move forward. I said, come back in 2 days. We will remove the IUD, and then we'll go from there. Now, but you could possibly be losing the baby. So 2 days later, the doctor pulled the IUD out, said if you're not miscarrying now, you will be likely 90% chance you'll be miscarrying. Come back in 2 days, because it was a Friday, so she said come back on Monday. Came back on Monday. There were 2
Oh my gosh.
babies.
So she was wrong.
So she was wrong. Somehow there was 2 babies. And, you know, we were very surprised, very emotional, just unsure of, you know, what was coming up next. And, you know, I went through the first 12 weeks bleeding and just not feeling comfortable at all. After that moment, I had to see a high-risk pregnancy doctor. And then about 23 weeks, it was 22 weeks and 5 days, actually. And I had a little bit of just leaking, and I thought something was wrong. Went to the hospital. They said I was going to be on bed rest.
Yes.
Until 36 weeks, at least. And so I know you know this part. And so we went in the hospital, scared as could be, just unsure of what was coming. And about 2 days later, I went into labor with both the boys. And I had to have an emergency C-section. I lost my son, Cristiano. And then Cruz spent about 296 days in the NICU.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. And then he's home.
Yes.
So, but he has also healthcare at home. So, yeah.
So we're going to just kind of talk about all of that, because a lot of people do have stories of losing newborns or they go through that. And so I just want our listeners to know, like, that's not why I asked you to come on. I asked you to come on because I've watched your entire story and I've talked to you about this. And Valerie, like, you're one of the most hope-filled people.
I might cry.
Yeah. Well, I was reading your bio and I was crying, like, in the dressing room before getting ready. And I was like, well, I can't cry during this thing. So I already cried about it. But, I mean, a lot of people have really traumatic stories, but they aren't as hopeful as you are. And they aren't as spirit-filled. And you just told me, like, you're considering going and helping other people that are struggling with this, and that maybe that's what you're going to do professionally. So we're going to get to that in a little bit. But can you just, I mean, tell us how you survived? I mean, I can't imagine. Like, of course, you know, we were told that was likely going to happen in our lives, and it didn't, by God's grace. But how did you survive that?
I think having just my background, whenever I was young, losing family members that I loved, you know, I sometimes don't know.
Yeah.
And I talk to God all the time. I'm like, I'm here through the whole pregnancy. When I started bleeding, I was like, you know, God, I'm here. I don't know what else to do at that point, you know? And I feel like he just carried me through the whole thing. Yeah.
Do you mind sharing about, like, what you meant by you have a past of loss?
No, I'd love to. When I was 6 years old, I lost my dad, my brother, and my uncle, and my grandpa. Sorry. No. In a boat accident. Yeah. So watching my mom and my sister. Yeah. My sister was a twin to my older brother. So watching my mom go through that hardship and being raised in so much grief and pain, I think helped me through the process now. Yeah. And, you know, just having that hope that there is something on the other side, you know? Okay, so what practically do you do? Because some people, I mean, like everything you just shared, like that would just be too much. Right. And so how practically do you get through your day? I think let's talk about like more the grief time period. The grief time period, honestly, with having Cruz in the NICU, I didn't have a whole lot of time to grieve Cristiano.
Right.
You know, I mean, we did have a funeral and his, you know, everything. It wasn't until Cruz came home that I realized I wasn't bringing two home.
Yeah.
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 So I brought Cruz home, and it was in that moment that I had that time to really grieve. And I ended up joining support groups, like Hand to Hold, and just kind of listening to other moms talk about what they're going through,
Yeah.
even with the loss, they, you know, and just listening. And then pretty soon I was active in talking about how I felt. And I think having a group support or someone to talk to would be just important. And not a lot of hospitals have that for these moms. And so I think that's super important.
Yeah, I did notice that. Like, we had such good, definitely healthcare, but I remember, and our NICU was 65 days, so like obviously yours is so much longer. But I remember like this one day stepping outside of the NICU, and I remember looking up at the stars, and I go, "Oh, this is trauma." Like, what? Being in the hospital and seeing your kids have all these issues and everything, and I just said that out loud, and I was like, and I said to myself, I said, one day I'm going to have to process this, but right now I just have to survive. And I think that that's kind of what you're describing. Like, there wasn't a time really to grieve because, as anyone who's been in the NICU knows, like, that's just full time. And so did you find yourself more in like survival mode? Like, when did that stop where you actually were able to grieve and process all that had happened?
Well, I didn't have a whole lot of time off of work, so I still was working, driving to work. I had an amazing boss and people that surrounded us, and they cared. So I would come to the hospital, see Cruz, go back to work. It was kind of insane, kind of busy, but it was in my drive home that I was able to spend 45 minutes kind of just processing things. And yes, I would cry. Yes, I would think about, all the bad things that could happen. But there was one day I realized on my drive home, like, why am I not being thankful for some of the things that Cruz is doing?
Wow.
And then for the things I have at home,
Yeah.
And work. Yeah.
And I think sometimes people think that that's maybe dismissing the pain. Like, if you're just trying to be grateful, but really it's what helps you survive the pain, is if you're looking around and being grateful. We haven't spent much time yet talking about Cruz. So I watch him like every day on your social media, and we've prayed for him, and he's doing just amazing. But can you just tell us about his journey, and then of course what has happened recently? So a little teaser.
Sorry. Okay. Yes. So his journey, it was scary at the beginning because he was so small.
Yeah.
So he was 1 pound, 6 ounces.
Oh, my word.
And he was very, very teeny tiny.
Yeah.
So the first 2 weeks were very critical for his life. He ended up having a brain bleed, a grade 4. It was a grade 2. The doctors did approach us telling us all these things that could happen with a grade 2 brain bleed. And then when it developed into a grade 4, they also approached us and said, these are the things that could possibly happen. He may not be doing walking or talking or anything like that. But we kept going. We said, as long as Cruz is going, we're gonna keep going.
Wow.
And so we kept going. Again, when we moved hospitals, they also asked us, and he was about 4 or 5 months old. His lungs were just weak, and that's pretty much why we moved hospitals. But when we moved, they told us again, these are the things with a grade 4 brain bleed, and he may not come off of the, he was intubated at this point. Like, he may not come off the ventilator. He may not know who you are. He may not, at this point he's smiling at me, and I said, no, you're wrong. He has that big old
with
smile
all due respect.
No. And he has the best smile.
He does.
Yeah.
He is. Oh, those little videos you post are just amazing.
And so he went through most of his hospital stay just with very weak lungs. He ended up having to get a trach, which is just to help him breathe a little better. He was on the ventilator. And then he has a G button for feeding because they weren't quite sure whether or not he'd be able to eat. And so when we left the hospital, we were trained at this other place. And when
talk about the training, because I remember talking to you about that. So it's that you and your husband both had to be able to take care of him.
Do a 24-hour stay. And we each had to learn how to take care of him.
Which is
removing. Very hard. It was every 2 hours you had to feed him, you had to suction him. It was very intense, but you had to learn, and you had to learn how to change the trach out. So basically removing his airway and putting another one back in really fast as you could, and hooking him up to the ventilator. So I've learned a lot.
Super mom. She's amazing.
And Robert has too, but he's very funny when he does it, and he'd rather just me do it.
Which God prepared you for because of your background in nursing.
Right. And so, when we came home, we had 24-hour nursing care.
Okay.
We had to have somebody there in the back seat driving. Or, I would be driving, they would be in the back seat to doctor's appointments or wherever we went. It's so much equipment. It's tons and tons of equipment that you'd have to carry. But again, doctors were like, he's never going to get off the ventilator. He's not. And so back to what you said, this year, we came home in 2019 and he was on the vent. And then at the end of that, he didn't need the ventilator at the end of that year. Then he just needed the trach. And then he got his trach removed.
Oh my gosh.
I know, isn't that crazy?
Incredible. Yes, I remember whenever you announced that, I was like, I am posting this everywhere. I was like, everyone needs to know. And I think, it's just amazing. Like, thank the Lord. But, so many moms with special needs kids, feel so discouraged or just exhausted. What would you say to them just to encourage them, or what's helped you?
I think what has helped me is, again, I'm going to go back to saying what I am thankful for. Because at this point in our lives, we weren't sure he was going to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So I think me saying out loud, I am thankful that he's able to not do that. I'm thankful he's able to do X, Y, Z. Because I am a special needs teacher too. So I do see that, I see a lot of parents struggle. And I think the most important thing is if you see your child struggling, or get them the help or whatever it is they need early. And I think that would be so helpful. He's in physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy. They're all coming to the house. So I think those types of things are super important. And also just talking to them, hanging out with them, and just do normal things, because they're just a child. Yeah.
So, and you have 2 other children.
Yes.
So can you kind of talk about what it's been like to balance spending time with them and making sure they're getting what they need? And then obviously this is, I don't want to say disrupted, but obviously you went from having 2 healthy children to overnight just being in this completely different situation. So how have you parented them and talked to them about loss and everything that's gone on?
I have been very open with the children about loss. They know what happened to Cristiano. They know what happened to my dad and my brother, my grandpa, my uncle. For my family, death is kind of normal. And I teach them that it's okay. They're in heaven, and they understand that. They were very young, though, when everything happened. Penelope was 2, and Miles was 5. And so Miles, I think, had a harder time because we weren't around as much with the kids. We were back and forth from the hospital. Like I said, I would go every day. Robert would come with me some of the time, but a lot of the times we just needed somebody to stay back with them. So it was me being away from them.
Right. Well, it sounds like he's amazing.
Robert? Yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as you and I both know, like,
Yeah.
unless you have a husband that's going to be there and help, it's very difficult.
Yes. And we did our best to make sure that it didn't disrupt their lives much. I mean, we have them in baseball and dance and like all the things.
I remember seeing that because you would be like, here I am at the NICU. And then one of them was at their sporting thing that weekend. I remember that specifically thinking, how is she doing that? That was
I mean, we really wanted to make it normal, have them feel normal. You know, normal could do T-ball and not be at the hospital all the time. Although they loved coming to Dallas to look at the trains, and that's what they would
There's lots to do here.
Yeah.
So if Penelope was 2, was there a time? I'm asking because I get asked this a lot, like as a therapist, and then just with the show, people wonder when should they talk to their child about something. So was it something that she always knew, or did y'all sit her down at a point and tell her the story?
I think because we did take her so often to the hospital, she kind of knew at 2. I continued to talk to her about it, though, at 3. And then even now, at home, we have nursing care.
Okay.
And so for her, having those nurses there is pretty normal. And we have people in and out of our house all day long.
Wow.
And just for Cruz.
Yeah.
And the kids, you know, I when we actually don't have nursing anymore, I'm not sure what the kids are going to do. Because now I'm going to have to sit down and talk to them about why we don't have nursing anymore.
Like, where are all those extra people that help? Well, that, you know, what you've been through is just so, it really is remarkable. And having worked in counseling for years, I mean, people really do turn bitter. I mean, everyone isn't as happy as you are sitting here. And I know that you have a lot of grief and you've been through so much. Other than being grateful, which that's a huge thing that we should do, do you have any more insight or just advice for people that really are fighting being bitter?
I think there comes a time when Robert was really bitter about everything. And we both were, but it was another car ride. And we just weren't sure where our life was going to go. Yeah. And nobody really is. Yeah. I think with that part of him, he just saw our other children in his eyes, you know. Yeah. He just saw what making their lives normal for him was kind of a letting it go a little bit here and there. It's okay to be bitter. There's nothing wrong with being so mad and frustrated. Yeah. There are times I've told moms, other moms going through the same thing, like, do we need to go throw plates against the wall? Because yes, you get so angry because you just don't understand why this is happening to me, and you see all these other young moms having healthy babies, or, you know, these
taking
other
them home
people.
the next day.
Yeah. And and it's
like,
just,
I can't relate to this at all.
Yeah. And you didn't expect to be in the NICU. You know, and for us, we weren't told what that looked like or what that was going to look like. And I think that's super important. And I know everyone's so excited about pregnancy and having this baby, but at least getting some sort of knowledge of what NICU would look like, I think would have made our experience a little bit different.
That is such a great point. Like, let's talk about, what do you think people need to know about the NICU?
I mean, you're going to walk in and just your breath is going to be taken away. It's scary. I mean, you know that. Like, you're going to hear thousands of beeps, and you're going to hear them in your dreams. You're going to hear them constantly. You're going to see all these other sick babies around and hear their stories. Yeah. And hear their beeps. And it can be very traumatizing. Even when I go back to the hospital for his last day, I was like, I have to get out of here. Yeah. Because it's just the hospital itself brings back all of those memories of being in the NICU. And, you know, I mean, I just think it's okay to be upset. It's okay to be bitter, but let's look at your child and see what they can do or how you can be thankful. I was thankful that he didn't desat below 58 one day.
Wow. So just for our listeners, what is someone supposed to be at?
100%.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you were thanking God that he didn't get below 58.
Yeah.
So just amazing. But
Yeah.
I want to highlight that that's a choice. Like you were
Right.
choosing to focus on that because it's not normal. I mean, it's
Right.
easy. It's much easier
It's
to be
easier
like,
to
this
say.
is terrible.
Yes.
This is scary. And so I think that that's something I keep hearing as you're talking, like you kept making the decision to be grateful.
It's
and
like
to
I had to
focus.
train my brain to
Right.
focus on
Right.
something, just one thing. If I could just leave here and think of one thing that I was thankful for, maybe that'll help the next day.
Yeah.
So I even went home and I did it with the kids, just about their day, because I didn't get to see them. So I would say, what are we thankful for? Who do we want to pray for? What it is that you can do something better tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so we would do that. We do that every night. But it's just kind of helping me, like train my own brain to think, if I think more positive, maybe I wouldn't have so much hatred and bitterness in my heart.
And it worked.
Yeah.
And I think we're kind of talking about a little bit of different things because anger, like that's so normal. But if you don't express it, like throwing plates, that's so good. Like that's when bitterness like takes root. And really, I mean, we all know bitter people that it's like they don't get past that, and it really makes people miserable. So it's okay to be angry. And then you're so right, because we do the pregnancy pictures and the posts and my baby's a watermelon or whatever. I guess not a watermelon, like an orange or whatever,
pineapple.
But I remember being on hospital bed rest, of course, and thinking, I don't know at all what happens after. I mean, because we knew they'd be in the NICU, so we were like, I remember thinking, no one has told me what's going to happen. Like, and so it really, there's no way. No, that's not true. I was going to say there's no way to prepare for it. That's not true. But I think you have to be proactive and ask.
Right.
Like, what is the process like? We took up half the room of the NICU, obviously, that we were in. But this is, okay, anyone listening to this that's not a NICU mom is going to be like, that is so stupid. But I know you're going to understand. I remember going in and someone else had given one of our kids a pacifier for the first time. And I was like, are you kidding me? Because basically so many firsts that everybody has pictures of and stories about, like you don't get to do any of those. Like a lot of us don't, if you're in the NICU. And so you're savoring those really small special things. And it was like this like young nurse, and she had already given the first pacifier, and I just like bawled. Like I was like, are you kidding? Because it just felt like I wasn't getting to do anything. And so that's a good point, really knowing like what are the protocols. And they told me after that, you need to tell us like what's important to you. And I'm like, well, I don't know. I'm a first time mom. But anyone listening who already knows that they're in a high risk pregnancy and that, there's a chance of the NICU, you need to go ahead and figure out what the rules are, what's important to you, because truthfully, like those nurses just work so hard and they're just kind of in a routine and they do a fabulous job. So thankful for the nurses out there, but they can't read your mind. Like they don't know if something's going to be really important to you. So I remember that very clearly. So you have really developed a heart for other moms and other people grieving. Can you just kind of talk about, I remember you reaching out so many times and saying, okay, like we've gone through this. I want to help other people. And that was my reaction too. Like I want to help other people that are scared and grieving and don't know, their life is just completely like a rug's pulled out from underneath. What have you found to be able to fill that desire to help other people?
I first reached out through Hand to Hold is what it's called, because our NICU had that. So when COVID happened, they were doing virtual visits. And so I jumped on the virtual visits, and it was for moms who have been home with kids from the NICU. So I jumped on there, and it was incredible just to listen and share stories. And every Wednesday, it was almost like we were looking forward to every single Wednesday, I then became a mentor for those moms. And then there were some moms that I still keep connections with and talk to all the time. For some, I think it helped. I think for some, it may not have helped so much because some, I would reach out and reach out and reach out. And I think that goes along with just being a friend to somebody who's going through this. If you know somebody in the NICU who has a NICU baby or maybe a loss, keep reaching out. And I think that's super important just for families and friends who don't know what to do in that situation. Because that's what I tried to do for these moms. I just kept reaching and just saying, how are you today? Even just a simple, how's everything going today? I had both mentorship for grief moms who have lost their child. And then also there was a few that were similar situations where they lost a twin. And then there were some that just had a trach baby at home or a couple others that were just in the NICU and were scared. Maybe their baby had a G-tube, I think. And so just things like that where you can kind of walk them through. I think that's very helpful because when you have a trach or when you have a G-button, you have so many questions. And like you said, it's all about asking questions too, I think. And, I just tried to be there for them and just listen. A lot of times that's what it was.
There's a question I want to ask as we're wrapping up. And I didn't tell you I was going to ask this, so not to scare you. But I just remembered because I did a lot of that the first few years too, reaching out if I knew anybody that had multiples, anybody in the NICU. And I still love to do that. I remember I had someone message me and they said, my doctors told us we need to abort one of them. And what do you think? And I was like,
well, I had the same.
I said, well, I would encourage you not to do that. And the doctor had told him to do that, simply because there were so many babies. And, but what I want to ask, because I remember this now, there is such a high statistic for divorce with couples that have lost a child and in the NICU and multiples. Like all of that really, as you and I both know, is very stressful on a marriage. So what advice do you have just for the wife that's like, this is not our best season of marriage? What would you say?
We prayed together.
Yeah,
a lot. Over the children, over Cruz and his little incubator. We did every day. We were together. We would pray over. So we prayed a lot together. And no matter how mad we were in the car on the way home, because there were a lot of things we didn't agree on, and it's okay. But we still, at the end of the day, we prayed together. We know that for Cruz, and for our children, the others, we want to give them the best life possible together. And so I think that was really important. Just knowing both of us had shared the same values, the same morals with our children, our other ones that were the ones in the NICU, but also with the other two. We shared those, and we got down to the deep root of it, of like, we share these two things. So how are we going to make this possible together? And we just try and do the best we can with all of them, make sure they're always happy and smiling. And you probably see that.
Yes. It's just remarkable watching your family. Yeah.
I think for us, it was really important to talk things out and just be honest with each other.
Talk things out and be honest with each other. Was there ever a time where you had to, I guess I just think about, a lot of times the focus is on the mom. Like I know like a lot of people were checking on me during all of it. And I think I didn't realize how much Ryan was going through really until later. And so I think like that's something too, if you're a wife or a mom, is realizing like guys, of course, we all know express differently than girls, but realizing they're going through a hard time too.
And they remember things that you may not remember as a super important memory from the NICU that really hurt them versus what might have hurt you in the NICU.
That's
so
a
I
good
think
point.
I think that that's a good thing, because you realize, oh, I didn't know that you were so, sad about this part. And, I mean, you have to kind of remind yourself, like, they have feelings
Like,
too.
you're like, oh, they had their own experience and their own hurt too. I'm going to end today just by praying for you and your family. Okay.
Okay.
So we're just going to do that. And for the other moms listening, God, I just thank you so much for the Rodriguez family, Lord, and just all that they have survived. And that is because of you. And we thank you just for their son that is in heaven. And we know that he is happy and having just a wonderful life in eternity with you. And I thank you for all of the miracles of Cruz's life. And most of all, I thank you for Valerie's joy and just how she and Robert have endured and that they give glory to you. And I want to pray for the NICU moms right now listening, and the moms of special needs, and just the ones that are in hard situations, God, that they would know it's okay to be angry, it's okay to be sad, but that they would not let their hearts turn bitter, that they would know that you are good and that you are going to be with them every step of the way. And I pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you for being on, Valerie.
Thank you so much.
I held back the tears for almost 30 minutes.
I did not hold
It's
back.
only because I already cried in the dressing room. So I don't.
I should have cried in the dressing room too.
It was helpful. But thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of Unapologetic. I know that you appreciated Valerie's story like I did. I want to encourage you to please share it with anyone you know that is struggling with grief in the NICU right now or the loss of a child. Valerie is so uplifting and hope-filled, and people need to hear that couples have survived and thrived and ended up still being grateful and having a wonderful family. Thank you for tuning in. Remember, you can hear today's episode and more at ptv.org/Julia and wherever you get your podcasts.